Paris. Winter. 1940. Perhaps 1941. The City of Light is no longer luminous. It lies crushed under the heavy boot of Nazi occupation. It is gray. It is dangerous. And above all, it is bitterly, bitingly cold. Inside a cavernous, drafty studio on the Rue de Grand Augustin, one of the most famous men on the planet is working. He wears a heavy coat indoors. This is not for lack of resources. He has refused the coal rations offered to him by the German authorities. He refuses to collaborate, even for basic warmth. He is freezing, but he is painting. Silence. Then, a heavy knock at the door. The Gestapo. This is not an isolated incident. The German secret police raid his studio frequently. They harass him. They tear through his papers, hunting for anything subversive, desperate for an excuse to arrest him. During one of these tense raids, a German officer spots a photograph lying on a table. It is not a portrait of a person. It is a photograph of a painting, Guernica. For those who have not seen it, it is a nightmare on canvas. A massive, chaotic, and screaming depiction of a Spanish town, carpet bombed by the Nazis just a few years prior. It is an accusation in black and white. The German officer picks up the photo. He sneers at the chaos. He looks at the artist. "Did you do this?" The artist looks him dead in the eye. "Remember, this is the Gestapo. These men disappear citizens daily," the artist replies. "No, you did." That story gives me chills every time. Dangerous, witty, absolute defiance. That moment is the essence of Pablo Picasso. It encapsulates the ego, the bravery, and the absolute refusal to back down. We are digging into the archives today to unpack the life of the man who arguably painted the 20th century. We are not just talking about a man with a paintbrush. We are talking about a celebrity, a revolutionary, a lover, a destroyer, and a creator. We have a massive stack of sources to navigate this journey. From definitive biographies and art history analyses from the Met to political records, including his FBI and police files. We even have revealing, sometimes troubling, psychological profiles of his relationships. Our mission is to move beyond the signature. Everyone knows the name Picasso. It is a brand, like Ferrari or Coca-Cola. But we will discover how a child prodigy from Malaga became the architect of modernity. We will uncover how his tumultuous, toxic love life dictated his artistic eras. We will separate the man from the myth. Before we descend into this saga, if you enjoy exploring the lives of the giants who shaped our world, please take a moment to subscribe to History Titans and share this story. You do not want to miss what comes next. Let us go back to the very beginning. We often think geniuses like Einstein or Mozart appear out of nowhere. With Picasso, the talent was there from day one. October 25th, 1881, Malaga, Spain. The mythology starts immediately. Even his birth was dramatic. The midwife believed he was stillborn. She left him on a table to attend to his mother. It was his uncle, a doctor, who saved him. He walked in, saw the lifeless infant, and blew cigar smoke into his face. The smoke made the baby grimace and cry. Pablo Picasso was literally smoked into life. An entrance fitting for a legend. Even his name is a production. He was born Pablo Diego José Francisco de Pablo, Juan de Pomelo, María de los Remedios, Cipriano de la Santísima Trinidad Ruiz y Picasso. It is no wonder he shortened it. Later in life, he adopted his mother's surname, Picasso, over his father's surname, Ruiz. A Ruiz was common in the region. Like Smith or Jones, he wanted to stand out. He liked the double S in Picasso. He thought it sounded more Italian, more musical. Legend says his first words were not mama or papa. According to his mother, Maria, his very first words were piz, piz, short for lapis, the Spanish word for pencil. She claimed he was drawing spirals before he could speak. He did not pick up that pencil in a vacuum. He had a teacher in the house, his father, José Ruiz y Blasco, known as Pepe. When Pepe was an academic painter and a teacher at the local art school, he specialized in painting birds, specifically pigeons. His work was realistic, traditional, and by modern standards, boring. He began training Pablo formally at age 7. This was not about creative expression. This was 19th century academic rigor. Jose believed in rules. You draw from plaster casts of Greek feet and Roman hands for months, perhaps years, before touching a paintbrush. It was repetitive, disciplined copying of the masters. For most children, this would be miserable. Pablo absorbed it. And here, we hit the first major turning point in the Picasso mythology, the story of the passing of the brush. So what is the story? The story goes that one day, Jose found young Pablo painting over one of his own sketches of a pigeon. He looked at the boy's work. He inspected the feet of the pigeon. He realized the technique was so precise, so perfect. His 13-year-old son had already surpassed him. The father's reaction was not jealousy or anger. It was resignation, total awe. Legend says he handed over his palette and brushes to Pablo and vowed never to paint again. That is incredibly heavy. Imagine being 13 years old and effectively retiring your own father because you are just that good. That is a massive psychological burden. It creates a sense of destiny, but you can also imagine a sense of superiority. He was a boy genius, no question. He painted his first oil painting, The Little Yellow Picador, at age 8 or 9. By the time he was a teenager, he hated regular school. He was terrible at it. He would sit in class and just draw pigeons or cut out little paper figures. He was intelligent, but he was completely checked out of anything that was not art. He could not focus on math or grammar. He called it a waste of time. Then, when he was 13, a tragedy struck that really solidified his path. His younger sister, Conchita, died of diphtheria in 1895. That must have been devastating. It was. There is a story that he made a bargain with God, a vow. He promised that if God saved Conchita, he would give up painting forever. But she died. And so, in this twisted, psychological way, he felt that his painting was bought at the price of her life. He had to be great because her death had allowed him to keep painting. That is a lot to carry. The family moved to Barcelona right after. Picasso always considered Barcelona his true home. It seems like the place where he stops being just a student and starts really becoming an artist. His father got him an audition for the advanced class at the School of Fine Arts, La Llotja. The entrance exam usually took older students an entire month to complete. It was complex. Drawing a nude figure from life, getting the anatomy perfect. Pablo finished it in a week. Some versions of the story say a single day. He got in at age 13. But he did not stay a dutiful student for long. You cannot be that talented and just follow the rules forever. By 16, he was sent to the Royal Academy in Madrid. This was supposed to be the pinnacle, the top of the mountain, and he hated it. Hated it. He called the instructions stupid, and the teachers fools. He stopped going to class almost immediately. Instead, he spent all his time at the Prado Museum. He was holding his own private masterclass. He was copying Velázquez, Goya, the great Spanish masters, and crucially, El Greco. At the time, El Greco was not very fashionable. He was considered a bit weird, a bit incorrect. But Picasso saw something there. Those elongated limbs, that expressiveness, the distortion of reality for emotional effect. He realized he did not have to paint things exactly as they looked to capture how they felt. You will see that influence pop up in a big way later in his blue period. So he drops out, effectively. He goes back to Barcelona and joins the Bohemians. He starts hanging out at a cafe called Els Quatre Gats, the Four Cats. It was the center of the universe for the Spanish avant-garde. This is his artistic adolescence. He is mingling with anarchists, modernists, poets, radicals. He grows his hair long, wears strange clothes. He is soaking it all up. He is soaking up the radical energy of the turn of the century. He is learning that art can be political, that it can be rebellious. This leads him to the inevitable destination. If you want to be an artist in 1900, you have to go to one place: Paris, the center of the art world, the magnet. He moves there around 1900, going back and forth a bit. But he eventually settles in 1904. He moves into this legendary building called the Bateau Lavoir, the laundry boat. That sounds quaint. It was anything but quaint. It was a squalid fire trap of a building in Montmartre. It was called the laundry boat because it swayed in the wind like the laundry barges on the Seine. It was a dump, a ramshackle wooden labyrinth. No electricity, no running water. There was one single faucet for the whole building. It was freezing in the winter, and an oven in the summer. But it was cheap. It was full of artists. It was a hive of creativity and poverty. This brings us to the first major period that everyone knows about. The Blue Period, 1901 to 1904. People assume it is called the Blue Period just because he liked the color blue. But it is so much deeper than that. We have to talk about the catalyst for this. It was not just an aesthetic choice. It was born out of deep, deep trauma. This involves his friend, Carlos Casagemas. He was Picasso's best friend, a fellow artist he came to Paris with. They were like brothers. But Casagemas was unstable. He fell madly in love with a woman named Germaine. Germaine was not interested. It was complicated. Casagemas suffered from impotence, and the romance failed. He spiraled into a deep depression. At a farewell dinner party in a Parisian cafe, Casagemas stood up. He gave a speech. He pulled out a revolver. He tried to shoot Germaine. He missed. And then he put the gun to his own temple and pulled the trigger. Picasso was not at the dinner. He had gone back to Spain. But the news shattered him. He felt immensely guilty for leaving his friend. He started painting Casagemas in his coffin. He painted the death wound on his temple. And suddenly, all the color just drained out of his work. It literally went blue. Monochromatic blues, greens, cool grays. The themes became poverty, blindness, and beggar's despair. You have famous works like The Old Guitarist or The Blind Man's Meal. The Old Guitarist is iconic. The figure is hunched, angular. It looks like he is folding in on himself. That is the El Greco influence coming back. That elongation creates the sense of spiritual starvation. But it was also literal starvation. Picasso was incredibly poor himself at this time. He burned his own drawings just to stay warm in that freezing studio at the Bateau Lavoir. He was painting the people he saw on the streets, the outcasts, the drunks, the prostitutes who were past their prime. It is interesting because this is some of his most beloved work now. People love the Blue Period. It is emotional. It is accessible. But at the time, nobody bought it. Who wants a painting of a starving blind beggar in their dining room? It was just too depressing. He was really struggling. So he is depressed. He is broke. And he is painting sadness. But then something shifts. The light comes back on. Around 1904, the Blue Period fades into the Rose Period. The palette warms up. Pinks, oranges, ochres, earth tones. What changed? As is the pattern we will see again and again with Picasso, a woman entered the picture. Fernande Olivier, his first muse, his first long-term love. She was a model, a bohemian herself. She was stunning, red-headed, voluptuous. They met at the Bateau Lavoir. Legend says he rescued her from a rainstorm, or met her at the single water tap. A classic meet cute. Her presence brought stability and affection into his life. He was not alone in the cold anymore. And the subjects changed too. No more beggars. The beggars turned into circus performers, saltimbanques, acrobats, harlequins, jesters. Why the circus? The circus was popular entertainment in Paris. But specifically, he was drawn to the traveling performers. They were outsiders, just like artists were. They lived on the road. They were poor. But they had this magic, this performance. The Harlequin figure appears a lot here. The Harlequin became a sort of alter ego for Picasso. The trickster. The entertainer who lives on the fringe of society, always wearing a mask. It is a lighter mood, but if you look closely at a painting like Family of Saltimbanque, they do not look happy. They look drifting, lost. It is a fragile happiness. They are together, but they are all looking in different directions. It is melancholy, but it is not the crushing despair of the Blue Period. Practically speaking, this work started to sell. This is when the Americans show up. The Stein family. Gertrude Stein and her brother Leo. They were wealthy American expats living in Paris. They were buying modern art when everyone else thought it was garbage. Gertrude Stein is a legend. She was the gatekeeper. If Gertrude Stein bought your painting, you mattered. She began buying Picasso's work. She invited him to her salons on Saturday evenings. This was crucial because it meant he did not have to burn his drawings for heat anymore. But more importantly, she introduced him to people. She introduced him to the man who would become his greatest rival, Henri Matisse. Every great genius needs a rival to push against. Michelangelo had Da Vinci, Tesla had Edison, Picasso had Matisse. They were total opposites. Matisse was older. He was already the leader of the fauves, the wild beasts. He was using these wild, unnatural colors to create joy and harmony. He painted things like Blue Nude and Bonheur de Vivre. He was the king of the avant-garde in Paris. Then there was Picasso, the scrappy Spaniard who wanted the crown. He looked at Matisse's work, which was all about pleasure, light, and color, and he felt challenged to destroy it. He wanted to make something that was not about pleasure. He wanted to make something dangerous. He decides to drop a nuclear bomb on the art world. He goes into a studio in 1907 and starts working on a painting that is so radical, so ugly, and so aggressive that he keeps it hidden for years. We are talking about the big one, Les Demoiselles d'Avignon. This painting changes everything, not just for Picasso, but for the entire world of art. It depicts 5 nude prostitutes from a brothel on Carré d'Avignon in Barcelona. But they do not look like women in any traditional sense. If you were expecting a Renaissance painting of a nude woman, this is terrifying. It is jagged. It is sharp. There is no perspective. The background and the foreground are completely smashed together. It looks like broken glass. The women's bodies are angular, almost aggressive. And the faces, specifically the 2 on the right, look like masks. What was he looking at to create this? It does not look like El Greco or the Impressionists. He was looking at 2 main things. First, ancient Iberian sculpture, primitive stone heads from Spain. But secondly, and most importantly, African art. This is the Trocadero story. Picasso visited the Trocadero Ethnographic Museum in Paris. It was not really an art museum. It was a dusty collection of colonial artifacts. It smelled of rot and dust. But he saw these African masks and sculptures. He had a profound epiphany. He realized that these carvers were not just trying to make something pretty to hang on a wall. They were making tools, magic things. He realized that the masks were designed to mediate between the self and the hostile spirits of the universe, to protect the wearer, to frighten away the unknown. He realized art could be magic. He realized painting is not an aesthetic operation. It is a form of magic designed to be a mediator between this strange, unhostile world and us. He wanted Les Demoiselles to be an exorcism. He wanted to destroy the polite, beautiful tradition of Western art. And when he showed it to people, they hated it. They were horrified. Even his closest friends. Matisse thought it was a bad joke and attempted to ridicule the entire modern art movement. Georges Braque, who would later become his partner, was initially troubled. He said, "It is as if someone had drunk kerosene to spit fire." It was deemed immoral because of the prostitutes, because of the style. It completely shattered the Renaissance tradition of perspective that had held for 400 years. In the Renaissance, a painting was like a window you looked through. You saw depth. Les Demoiselles was a wall that looked back at you. It confronted you. But this failure, this shock, actually birthed the next big movement. This leads to Cubism. It was the proto-Cubist explosion. And once Georges Braque got over his initial shock, he realized Picasso was onto something. They teamed up. From 1909 to 1914, they were inseparable. Picasso said they were roped together like mountain climbers. I love that image. 2 men scaling the mountain of modern art, relying on each other. So let us break down Cubism. People see the cubes and get confused. What were they actually trying to do? They were trying to represent reality more truthfully than a photograph. That sounds contradictory. Cubism looks way less real than a photo. But think about it. When you look at a coffee cup, do you stand perfectly still and close one eye? No. You have 2 eyes. You move your head. You see the curve of the rim, the side, the handle, maybe a bit of the bottom all at once. Your brain compiles all those views into the concept of cup. The photograph freezes 1 millisecond from one single angle. That is a lie, in a way. Cubism tries to show you the top, the bottom, the inside, and the outside all at the same time. It is like taking the object apart, unfolding a cardboard box and laying it flat on the canvas. That is analytic cubism, the first phase. Breaking the object down into geometric components and analyzing it. They used very neutral colors. browns, grays, muted greens. They did not want color to detract from the structure. They wanted you to focus entirely on the form. It was purely intellectual. Then came the second phase, synthetic cubism. That is when they started building things back up. They introduced collage. They started pasting newspaper, cloth, sheet music, and rope directly onto the canvas. Still Life with chair caning is the famous one. It has a piece of oilcloth printed with a chair caning pattern pasted right onto the painting. It seems so normal now, mixed media. But back then, it was revolutionary. It completely questioned what reality and art actually was. Is the real newspaper more real than the painted bottle next to it? It blurred the line between art and life. It was playful, intellectual, and completely new. But then the real world intervened. World War I, 1914. The partnership ended abruptly. Braque was French. He was drafted and sent to the trenches to fight. Picasso was a Spanish citizen. Spain was neutral. So Picasso stayed in Paris? And Braque? Braque suffered a severe head wound in the war. He survived, but he was gone for years. When he finally came back, he and Picasso had drifted apart. The marriage was over. The great collaboration had ended. Picasso had moved on. And moving on for Picasso usually meant a new woman and a whole new style. That is the pattern. There is a theory, and the sources really back this up, that when Picasso changed women, he changed everything. His style, his friends, his house, even his dog. He cannibalized his life for his art. That brings us to a very complex part of his life, the women. This is where the biography gets messy. We have to address the Picasso's women dynamic head on. There is a famous and frankly terrible quote he allegedly said to a mistress, "There are only two kinds of women, goddesses and doormats." Oof, hard to hear. It sounds like pure narcissism. It is. And there is a massive debate among historians. Were these women muses who fueled his genius? Or were they victims of a toxic power dynamic? The answer is probably both. He drew immense energy from them, painted them obsessively, and then often discarded them cruelly when they no longer sparked his creativity. Let us look at the timeline. Who comes after the Bohemian Fernanda? Olga Koklova, a Russian ballerina. He met her in 1917 while working on sets for the Ballet Russes, the most avant-garde, fashionable ballet company in the world. Suddenly, the bohemian living in the laundry boat is gone. Completely gone. Olga was high society. She was an aristocrat, or at least acted like one. She wanted status. Picasso starts dressing in tailored suits, wearing a monocle, going to fancy balls. They marry in 1918. They move to a fancy apartment in a rich district of Paris. And the art shifts. It is not Cubism anymore. It is the neoclassical period, the return to order. After the chaos of Cubism and the horror of World War I, Europe wanted stability. Picasso starts painting massive statuesque figures that look like Greek or Roman sculptures. Heavy, realistic, serene. A total 180 from the jagged lines of Cubism. But domestic bliss does not last with Picasso. He gets bored. He feels stifled. The high society life wasn't really him. The marriage soured quickly. Olga was jealous, probably rightfully so. Picasso began to resent her. In his art, she started to transform from a goddess into a monster. He painted her with sharp teeth, distorted bodies. He called her the Nagger, and then the Escape. 1927. He meets Marie-Thérèse Walter. This is the famous story outside the Galeries Lafayette department store in Paris. She was 17 years old. He was 45. He walked up to her, grabbed her arm and said, "Miss, you have an interesting face. I would like to do a portrait of you. I am Picasso. We are going to do great things together." Which is quite a pickup line. Did she even know who he was? She had no idea. She was just a girl who liked swimming and sports. She was flattered. They began a passionate secret affair. It was hidden from Olga for years. If Olga was the statue, who was Marie-Thérèse? She is the absolute essence of his sensual surrealist period. Biomorphic shapes, curvy, soft, incredibly colorful. If you see a painting of a sleeping blonde woman with lavender skin and soft rolling curves, that is Marie-Thérèse. The dream, le rêve. She seems very passive in those paintings. always sleeping or waiting. She was his refuge. She was undemanding, young, athletic, and completely submissive to him. She gave him a daughter, Maya. But then, as always, the dynamic shifts. He needed intellectual stimulation. He got bored again. Entered Dora Maar in 1936. Dora was different. She was not just a muse to be looked at. She was an artist herself, a very talented one. She was a photographer and a surrealist. She was intellectual, political, intense. She spoke Spanish, which Marie-Thérèse did not. She could challenge him. She was his equal in many ways, and their relationship was incredibly turbulent. There is a legendary and really disturbing story about these two women. Marie-Thérèse apparently came to the studio while Dora was there with Picasso. Marie-Thérèse demanded he choose between them. Picasso, who was sitting up on his scaffold painting Guernica, basically shrugged. He said, "You two fight it out." And they did. They wrestled on the floor, physically fought, and he just watched. He continued painting. He later called it one of his choicest memories. It highlights the cruelty that could coexist with his creativity. He fed on the drama. He loved having women fight over him. Dora Maar is the face of the weeping woman. Her period is angular, tragic, anxious. If Marie-Thérèse was the soft curve, Dora was the jagged edge. She entered his life in a moment when the world itself was becoming jagged and broken. This leads us to the most political moment of his life, the Spanish Civil War. Up until 1936, Picasso was largely apolitical. He was a painter. He did not really care about politics, but when the Spanish Civil War broke out, with the Republicans, the leftists, the elected government, fighting against General Franco's fascists, Picasso finally picked a side. He supported the Republicans. He hated Franco and everything he stood for. The Republican government even appointed him director of the Prado Museum in absentia to help save the art from the bombings. But his real contribution was not administrative. It was Guernica. Let us talk about the event first. April 26, 1937. It was a Monday, market day in the Basque town of Guernica in northern Spain. The town had no strategic military value whatsoever. None. But the Nazi German Air Force, the Condor Legion, flew over and carpet-bombed the town for hours. Targets were civilians. Entirely civilians. Women, children, farmers selling their livestock. Over 1,600 people were killed. It was the first major aerial bombardment of a civilian population in history. It was a test run for World War II. It was terror bombing, designed purely to break the spirit of the people. Picasso heard about this in Paris. He read the reports in the newspapers. He saw the stark black and white photos of the destruction, the rubble, the bodies. He had been struggling with a commission for the Spanish pavilion at the World's Fair. He did not know what to paint. Suddenly, he knew. He painted it incredibly fast. In about a month, Dora Maar actually photographed the entire process, giving us an amazing record of how it evolved. He changed positions. He moved figures. It was a complete frenzy of activity. The painting is absolutely massive. A mural, 11 feet tall by 25 feet wide, and it is painted entirely in black, white, and gray. Why no color? No red for blood. The lack of color does two things. First, it evokes the newspaper reports he read. It gives it a documentary, stark quality. Second, it removes the distraction of decoration. It is pure form and pure suffering. The imagery is not a battle scene. There are no soldiers shooting each other. It is a massacre scene. It focuses entirely on the victims. You see a screaming horse, representing the suffering people. You see a bull, which is ambiguous. Is it brutality, fascism, or the endurance of Spain? You see a woman holding a dead child, screaming at the sky, a modern pieta. You see a soldier lying dead, with a broken sword and a single flower growing from his hand. It is chaotic, but it is organized chaos. It is a pyramid of grief. It toured the world to raise money for Spanish refugees. It became the universal anti-war symbol. It stopped being just about a Spanish town and became about the horror of war itself. Then the war came to him. World War II hits. The Nazis invade Paris in 1940. Picasso could have left. He had money. He was famous. He could have gone to New York or Mexico. Most artists did. Salvador Dali went to America. André Breton went to America. But Picasso chose to stay. He stayed in occupied Paris. That seems incredibly risky. His art was considered degenerate by the Nazis. They hated modernism. They called it entartete Kunst, degenerate art. He was banned from exhibiting. He could not sell his work publicly. The Gestapo watched him constantly, but his mere presence became a form of resistance. He was there in his studio, refusing to leave, refusing to kowtow. There is a quote from this time: "Painting is not done to decorate apartments. It is an instrument of war." He meant it. It was an offensive and defensive weapon against the enemy. He would apparently hand out those postcards of Guernica to German soldiers who visited his studio. It was this quiet, dangerous defiance. He was saying, "I am still here." So the war ends. Paris is liberated in 1944. And Picasso makes another surprising move. He joins the Communist Party. This brings us to the post-war era, the communist celebrity. This is interesting because historically, the communists did not actually like his art. The Soviets liked socialist realism, happy tractors, strong workers with big muscles, clear messages. They did not like Cubism. They thought it was confusing, elitist, decadent, and bourgeois. But Picasso was a trophy. He was the most famous artist in the world. Having him in the party was a massive public relations win for them. So why did he join? He was the richest artist in the world. He owned castles. It is a paradox. He said he joined because he believed, after the horrors of fascism and the war, that art alone is not enough. He wanted to stand with the working class, with the people who had fought the Nazis, and the French resistance was heavily communist. For him, it was a moral stance, not an aesthetic one. He creates some very famous political symbols during this time. The dove of peace. He created a simple lithograph of a dove that became the global symbol for the peace movement in 1949. It was absolutely everywhere. He even named his daughter Paloma, which means dove in Spanish. And then there is Massacre in Korea, painted in 1951. It is a direct criticism of American intervention in the Korean War. It shows robotic, futuristic-looking soldiers shooting pregnant women and children. It is a clear callback to Goya's the 3rd of May, 1808. It showed he was still willing to use his art to attack political violence, no matter who was perpetrating it. So he is deeply political now, but his personal life is still chaotic. We have to talk about Françoise Gillot. She is unique in the Picasso pantheon. Why? Because she is the only woman who ever left him. She walked out. That just did not happen to Picasso. Usually, he was the one who did the discarding. She met him in 1943. She was 21. He was 61. She was an artist, very intelligent, very strong-willed. They had 2 children, Claude and Paloma. But she eventually got tired of the games and the indignity. In 1953, she took the kids and she left. Picasso did not take that well. He was furious. He told her nobody leaves Picasso. He tried to blacklist her in the art world, telling galleries not to show her work. But she did something even bolder. She wrote a book, Life with Picasso, a tell-all memoir. It exposed his cruelty, his superstitions, his difficult nature. It humanized him, but it also revealed the monster behind the genius. It enraged him, but it became a bestseller. It was the first time the world really saw the man behind the myth. So Françoise leaves. He is in his 70s now. Does he finally settle down? He marries one last time, Jacqueline Roch. She was a sales assistant at a pottery studio where he was working in the south of France. She became his second wife in 1961. She was very different from Françoise. She was obsessively devoted. She called him Monseigneur, which means my lord, and would kiss his hands. She completely isolated him from his children, partially because of the fallout from Françoise's book, but also out of jealousy. She built a fortress around him, but she also gave him the stability he needed to work in his final years, and he worked like a maniac. This is the final chapter, the race against time. He was in his 80s and 90s. He was absolutely terrified of death. He refused to write a will because he thought it was bad luck. He just painted frantically. What did the art look like in this period? It was rough, expressive, almost violent. He painted musketeers, 17th century swashbucklers with swords and pipes, and lots of sexually explicit themes. It was raw, untamed energy. The critics hated it at the time. They called it the work of a senile old man. They said he was losing his technique, that it was sloppy, scribbles of a madman. But history has reevaluated that completely. Now we see it as the precursor to neo-expressionism. Artists in the 1980s like Jean-Michel Basquiat and Julian Schnabel were looking at late Picasso. They saw the freedom, the speed, the absolute refusal to be polite. It was punk rock before punk rock existed. He died in 1973, age 91. April 8, 1973, in Mougins, France. He died while entertaining friends for dinner. The aftermath was tragic, Shakespearean. Because he left no will, there was a massive legal battle over the estate. But the personal tragedy was worse. His grandson Pablito, whom he had been estranged from due to Jacqueline, drank a bottle of bleach and died. Why? Because Jacqueline would not let him attend the funeral. That is just horrific. It is. And Jacqueline later committed suicide in 1986. Marie-Thérèse, the blonde muse, committed suicide in 1977. Like a blast radius, he created immense world-changing beauty, but he left a lot of destruction in his wake. When we look at the legacy, we see 50,000 works, paintings, drawings, sculptures, ceramics, an unbelievable volume. He paid his estate taxes in artwork, which is how the Musée Picasso in Paris was formed. It is the greatest single collection of his work in the world. It is overwhelming. So let us try to synthesize this. What does it all mean at the end of the day? I think it means that Picasso was not just one artist. He was 5 or 6 different revolutionary artists in one lifetime. Blue, Rose, Cubist, Neoclassical, Surrealist. He reinvented himself every single decade. Most artists have one great idea. He had 10. He was a sponge. The ultimate sponge. He absorbed everything. African art, the old masters, his lovers, politics, war, and he reassembled it into something completely new. And the complexity of the man, the genius versus the monster. You cannot separate the creation from the destruction. He broke the rules of art. He broke perspective. And yes, he broke the people around him. But in doing so, he built the visual language of the 20th century. You literally cannot imagine modern art without him. It brings us right back to that quote from the intro. No, you did. Exactly. He held up a mirror to the century, the wars, the fragmentation, the desire, the cruelty. And he said, I did not do this. You did. I just painted it. That is a powerful place to leave it. Picasso, the man who painted the century. A complicated, destructive, and utterly brilliant man. If you enjoyed unpacking the layers of this artistic titan, make sure you subscribe to History Titans. We have more stories of the figures who shaped our world coming up. And please like and share this discussion if it gave you a new perspective on the man behind the canvas. Thanks for joining us. Until next time.